In the forgotten annals of history, where empires turn to dust and crowns become relics of sorrow, some stories are too dark to be told in the light of day. They are whispered in the shadows, carried on the cold night wind that rattles the bones of fallen kingdoms. This is one such tale, a story of a promise that became a curse, a family devoured by its own throne, and a bride whose wedding veil became her funeral shroud. We journey back to a land whose name is now lost, to a palace of cold stone and colder hearts, to uncover the tragic legend of the bride who became a ghost. For in the ruins of ambition, the most haunting specters are not those of the dead, but of the love that was murdered long before the bodies fell. Before we speak of kings and queens, we must first walk through the silence. This is the skeletal remains of the kingdom of Athuria, a name now only found on crumbling maps and in the ramblings of mad poets. Its once-proud spires now claw at the sky like the fingers of a drowning man, and its grand halls echo not with music, but with a profound and heavy emptiness. They say if you stand in the courtyard when the moon is thin, you can still hear the rustle of a silk gown and a faint, sorrowful hum, the ghost of a promise broken. This is the story of that ghost. It is the story of King Thuron, the man who built an empire on a foundation of shadows, of Queen Alara, the woman whose love was not enough to warm his frozen heart, and of Princess Isolde, the innocent bride whose destiny was written in blood before she ever drew her first breath. Their tale is a chilling reminder that a crown is not merely a symbol of power, but a heavy, gilded tombstone waiting for the head that wears it. King Thuron was not born to rule Athuria. He took it. He was a man carved from the unforgiving granite of the northern mountains, his ambition as vast and as cold as the winter snows of his youth. Beginning as a minor lord with nothing but a name and a sword sharpened by resentment, he saw the world not as a place to live, but as a board to be conquered. His rise was a masterclass in ruthless strategy. He turned rivals into allies only to betray them at the moment of their greatest trust. He sowed discord among the noble houses, then presented himself as the only man who could restore order. Each step toward the throne was paved with a broken oath or a silent midnight execution. When he finally seized the capital and placed the onyx crown upon his own head, the people did not cheer with love, but fell silent with fear. They knew they were not witnessing the dawn of a golden age, but the arrival of a long, dark night. Thuron was not a king. He was a predator who had finally cornered his prey, and his hunger was just beginning. To solidify his violent claim to the throne, King Thuron needed something he could not conquer with a sword: legitimacy. He found it in Queen Alara, a princess from a respected, ancient southern dynasty. Her arrival in Athuria was like a single, fragile bloom in a barren wasteland. She possessed a grace and wisdom that felt alien in Thuron's cold, calculating court. Her laughter was a melody in halls that had only known the clang of steel, and her kindness was a balm to the wounds of a kingdom still bleeding from Thuron's ascent. For a brief, fleeting moment, it seemed she might tame the wolf she had been forced to marry. She softened his public image, advised him with a gentle but firm hand, and won the hearts of the common folk who saw in her the mother their broken land so desperately needed. But a lily, no matter how beautiful, cannot survive in the shadow of a mountain. Ilara soon learned that her role was not to be a partner, but a decoration, a beautiful, silent testament to the king's power, trapped in a gilded cage of her own. The birth of Princess Isolde was the kingdom's last collective sigh of hope. She was a perfect fusion of her parents, inheriting her mother's ethereal beauty, and it was whispered, a spark of her father's unyielding will. For the first time, King Thuron appeared to be more than just a conqueror. Holding his daughter, he saw not a pawn, but a legacy of flesh and blood. Queen Alara, in turn, poured all her stifled love and desperate hopes into the child. Isolde became her world, a tiny, innocent vessel for all the goodness she had hoped to bring to Athuria. The kingdom celebrated for weeks, believing the princess to be a sign of divine favor, a promise that the brutal reign of the father would give way to a gentler era under the daughter. The laughter of a child now echoed through the stone corridors, and for a short while, the shadows in the palace seemed to recede. But hope is a dangerous thing in a kingdom built on fear, for it casts a light that makes the encroaching darkness seem all the more absolute. The joy was a fragile, beautiful lie, destined to be shattered. The warmth brought by the princess did not last. A court built on betrayal is a fertile ground for conspiracy, and King Thuron was no exception. The lords he had manipulated on his path to power now watched him with envious eyes, their loyalty as thin as glass. Whispers began to slither through the palace like venomous snakes. They spoke of the king's paranoia, of his growing obsession with a rival kingdom to the east, the Iron Hegemony, a brutal empire whose power dwarfed even his own. Queen Alara noticed the change in her husband. The brief softness she had seen upon their daughter's birth had vanished, replaced by a familiar, chilling ambition. He spent long nights locked away with his spymasters, poring over maps and encrypted letters. The palace, once again, became a place of secrets. Guards were changed without reason, loyal servants disappeared, and a palpable sense of dread began to permeate the air. The shadows were gathering, not from outside the kingdom's walls, but from within the very heart of the royal court, circling the innocent princess like wolves stalking a lamb. King Thuron's ambition was a bottomless pit, and the onyx crown was not enough to fill it. He was haunted by the specter of his own mortality and the fear that his legacy would be nothing more than a footnote of violence. He looked at the vast and wealthy Iron Hegemony and saw not a threat but a prize. To challenge them was suicide, but to ally with them, that could secure his dynasty for 1,000 years. His mind became a tempest of calculation, weighing every asset he possessed. His armies, his wealth, his queen, they were all just pieces on a board. And then his gaze fell upon his greatest, most precious asset, his daughter, Princess Isolde. She was no longer just his child, a symbol of hope. In his cold, strategic mind, she had transformed into the ultimate bargaining chip. Her innocence, her beauty, her royal blood, they were the keys to unlocking an unbreakable alliance with the most powerful and most feared monarch on the continent. Thuron was willing to sacrifice anything for his place in history, and he was beginning to realize that the highest price would be Queen Alara was not blind. She saw the monster in her husband re-emerging, more powerful and more determined than ever before. But she was powerless. Her title was a formality, her influence a ghost of what it once was. Her letters to her family in the south were intercepted, her most trusted handmaidens replaced with the king's spies. She became a prisoner in her own palace, her life a performance of serene royalty for a court that knew she held no real authority. Her days were spent in suffocating silence, her nights in quiet, desperate prayer. Her only solace was her daughter. She tried to build a wall of love and innocence around Princess Isolde, to shield her from the creeping darkness of her father's ambitions. She taught her songs of the old kingdoms, tales of honor and courage, everything King Thuron was not. Every smile from her daughter was both a joy and a torment, for Alara knew she was raising a beautiful, gentle soul for a world that was preparing to crush her. Her tears, shed only in the dead of night, were a silent testament to her helplessness as she watched her husband's shadow slowly consume their daughter's future. Princess Isolde grew into a young woman of breathtaking grace, a living embodiment of her mother's spirit. She was beloved by the people, who saw in her the promise of a kinder, gentler reign. She learned the languages of diplomacy, the steps of the courtly dance, and the weight of a royal title. But she was shielded from the true nature of the games being played around her. She saw her father as a distant, powerful figure, a king to be respected, not a man who saw her as a tool. She loved her mother deeply, but could not understand the source of the profound sadness that always seemed to linger in her eyes. Isolde lived in a carefully constructed illusion, a world of gilded surfaces and polite lies. She was unaware that her every move, her every accomplishment, was being noted and assessed by her father not with pride, but with cold, strategic appraisal. She was the most valuable piece in his game, yet she did not even know she was playing. Her destiny was not her own. It was a fragile, delicate thread being woven into a tapestry of betrayal, and she was utterly, tragically, blind to the shears waiting to cut it. The truth, when it was finally revealed, was more monstrous than Queen Alara could have ever imagined. The king had been in secret negotiations with the Iron Hegemony for months. An alliance had been forged, one that would make Athuria untouchable. But the price was not gold or territory. The aging, cruel, and famously barbaric king of the hegemony, a man known for his collection of broken wives, demanded a bride of pure royal blood to seal the pact. He demanded Princess Isolde. When Thuron told his queen, he did not ask for her blessing, he delivered a decree. Their daughter, their only child, was to be sold into a life of certain misery and probable death to serve his ambition. Alara was shattered. She pleaded, she raged, she begged him to see the heartless monstrosity of his decision. But to Thuron it was merely a transaction. He saw his daughter's impending suffering as a necessary, acceptable cost. "She will be a queen," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "That is more than most girls could ever dream of." In that moment, Alara knew that the husband she once hoped to save was truly gone, and in his place stood a king who would burn his own family to warm himself by the fires of his legacy. Secrets of such magnitude cannot be kept forever. A sympathetic servant, horrified by the queen's grief, leaked the news of the royal betrothal. The story spread like wildfire through the kingdom. The people, who had tolerated Thuron's tyranny, would not tolerate the sacrifice of the princess they adored. The girl who represented their only hope was being sold like livestock to a foreign monster. This was not a political maneuver. It was a sacrilege. A slow-burning resentment erupted into a furious inferno of rebellion. Farmers left their fields, blacksmiths forged weapons, and old lords who had been cowed into submission now raised their banners in open revolt. The rage was personal, fueled by a collective sense of paternal love for the princess. They marched on the capital not to seize power, but to save their little Rose, their Isolde. The kingdom Thuron had so carefully built with fear and strategy began to crumble, its foundations washed away by a tide of popular fury. The king had miscalculated. He had understood the price of power, but he had never understood the power of love. As the rebellion raged at the palace gates, King Thuron saw his wife not as a partner in crisis, but as the source of his problems. He believed she had incited the rebellion, her sorrow a poison that had infected the kingdom. He had her imprisoned in the highest tower of the palace, isolating her completely as the world she knew burned below. Locked away, Queen Alara heard the sounds of the battle and knew that all was lost. Even if the rebels succeeded, her daughter's fate was sealed. The pact was made. She would not live to see Isolde shipped off to her doom, nor would she give Thuron the satisfaction of using her as a bargaining chip. In her final moments, she did not weep for herself, but for the daughter she had failed to protect. With a steady hand, she drank a fast-acting poison she had kept hidden for years, a last resort against her husband's cruelty. Her death was not an act of surrender, but a final, silent act of defiance. They found her lying peacefully on her bed, a faint, tragic smile on her lips, having chosen her own terms for escape from the waking nightmare her life had become. The news of the queen's death was the final spark that ignited the inferno. The royal guards, already wavering, laid down their arms, refusing to fight for a king who would drive his own wife to such despair. The rebels stormed the palace, their cries for justice echoing through the halls. They found King Thuron not in a heroic last stand, but alone in his throne room, staring blankly at the empty space beside his. He was no longer a feared tyrant. He was a pathetic, broken man, undone by the consequences of his own cold heart. They dragged him from his throne and stripped him of his crown and robes, the symbols of a power that had cost him everything. He was paraded through the streets, where the people who once feared him now pelted him with stones and curses. His execution was swift and unceremonious, a footnote at the end of his own bloody history. His last sight was not of a grand legacy, but of the hateful faces of the people he had sacrificed everything to rule. He, in the chaos of the king's fall and the queen's death, Princess Isolde was forgotten. Trapped in her chambers, she was a ghost in her own home, her fate an afterthought in the violent birth of a new order. The envoys from the Iron Hegemony had arrived to collect their prize, uncaring of the civil war that had consumed the kingdom. Dressed by terrified handmaidens in a white wedding gown for a groom she had never met and a future she could not bear, Isolde walked not to an altar but to the edge of the highest palace balcony. Below, the city burned. Her father was dead, her mother was gone, and her kingdom was in ruins. She was utterly alone, a bride with no one to give her away but death itself. She looked at the white silk of her gown, the symbol of a future she refused to accept. With a final, whispered prayer for her mother, she stepped into the open air. Her fall was silent, a flash of white against the stone and smoke. She chose the cold embrace of the earth over the cruel arms of a tyrant. It was on her wedding day that Princess Isolde died, and in that moment the bride truly and finally became a ghost. Athuria did not recover. The rebellion that had united to save the princess fell apart without a common cause. Rival lords tore the kingdom to pieces, fighting over scraps of a broken legacy. The Iron Hegemony denied its bride, retaliated with a brutal invasion that salted the earth and shattered what little remained. Within a generation, the kingdom of Athuria was no more. Its name was erased from the maps, its history a garbled tale told by refugees. The Grand Palace, once the seat of a terrible ambition, was left to crumble, a monument to a family that had devoured itself. The onyx crown was lost to time, and the names of Thuron, Ilara, and Isolde were swallowed by the silence. All that remained was the legend, a local superstition, a story told to frighten children. They say the palace is haunted by a weeping lady in white, a phantom bride who forever walks the battlements on stormy nights, searching for the mother she could not save and the future that was stolen from her. The story of the House of Thuron is a testament to a brutal truth etched into the very fabric of history, that the hunger for power is an insatiable void that consumes all light, all love, and all innocence. A king's legacy is not measured by the breadth of his lands or the height of his monuments, but by the echoes of the lives he shattered to achieve them. King Thuron gained a kingdom and lost his soul. Queen Ilara sought to plant a garden in a barren land and was consumed by its thorns. And Princess Isolde, the symbol of hope, became a tragic specter, a permanent scar on the memory of a place that no longer exists. Their ghosts do not haunt the stones of their fallen palace. They haunt the very idea of power itself, reminding us that every throne is built upon a graveyard of forgotten dreams, and the heaviest crowns are always worn by the dead. Their tragedy is a whisper that will endure as long as ambition wars with love, a lesson written in the dust of their forgotten kingdom. History bleeds, and its echoes are written in the cries of kings, queens, and lost princesses. This was the Fear Room. Don't forget to subscribe and like for more dark history tales.